where all the witnesses and all the parties were from Victoria because the schoolies week were out.
Right.
So I went to Melbourne and from Sydney. Magistrate sitting in Queensland with Crown, and all the witnesses are in a remote facility.
Yeah.
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 Can I ask you, do you this type or? Good morning, friends. Hi.
Me too.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my daughter there, who's junior counsel to Julia. She just became a barrister 2 weeks ago.
Ah, congratulations.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Goodness, are we at that stage in our careers? I am as well, because my son's about to start at the bar in Melbourne, which is a very strange thing. I think I'm positive about it.
Now, her mother's a magistrate.
Right.
The first Indigenous magistrate in Queensland. So, terribly exciting.
Yes, yes.
It's like the Shirley Five.
I think that probably means we're not in our 20s anymore, doesn't it?
Well, my youngest just turned 21, so I'm 6, so to show how old I am.
I've got one younger than that, still at school.
Hey, it's Carly. The YouTube one. Yes, make sure to close it. And then go back to your Word document. And scroll up. It is. Okay. To the YouTube channel. Yeah, cool. Then go live.
Peggy, are you going to make any further adjustment to 42?
Yes, in line with what we discussed.
Okay, fine.
Is that all right, Ian?
Yeah.
I'll put that on the record.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, perfect. We can see the So it's all good on your own session?
The drug testing after critical incidents, can you just check which issue covers that? I just want to put that on the record.
Oh, we have. Yeah. Can you hear? Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah, all right, cool, we'll do that.
Yeah. No, it's called drug testing. Drug testing after a critical incident.
Sorry, can you just appearances. So in person, we should have Dr. Sorry, actually, I'll just get you to run through.
Ian Freckleton for the Northern Territory Police.
Yeah.
And Miss Bernard is in Melbourne as my junior.
Perfect, yeah. Is Miss Bernard on the teams? Is she supposed to be?
She's supposed to be, yes. I assume she is.
It doesn't look like Miss Bernard.
I'll text her to make sure she comes on.
Yeah. Okay. And sorry, next.
Right. Andrew Bowe for the Walker Lane and Robertson families.
Okay.
That's
Martin,
me.
did you say?
Can you
Sorry?
raise
Martin, surname Martin.
Bowe, B-O-E.
Subject. Yeah.
It's just too hard bending down. Thanks, Patty.
Okay, yeah, so that's okay, and sorry,
Paula Monroe for the Brown family.
Monroe,
And
yeah.
instructed by Streetons, but they're watching on the live stream, they're not in the Teams.
Oh, okay, all right.
I think that the issues, in terms of the revised issues list, any argument has fallen away. Is how I understand it, including the
Miss Bernard says that the link is not loading and she's at the moment watching on the YouTube link.
Okay, that's
So-
sufficient for her?
Yes, that's enough.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think, well, Tom Hart clarified that this morning, so I think that's good.
Safe or maybe Narja in there. I know you.
Oh, safe, sorry,
Narja.
so they are going to, okay, I'll check it.
And safe or
And
right.
Yeah, no, that's fallen away, that's fallen away.
Hello?
Yeah, so I've spoken to,
They can hear us as well.
yeah.
So they're not maintaining.
No,
that.
no, because you'll hear me say that it's
Yes.
it's about
Sorry, do we have Mr. McCarthy?
issues.
He's there.
I'll clarify.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
I'm on the link.
Thank you.
so you're not,
Not maintaining.
It seems to be more issues and
another is going to help. Not the Teams.
but if you want to question it.
Because she's not adopted.
G'day, I'm so sorry,
My submissions about the health issues. The difficulty is the issues about communities and with that in mind, because NT Health just did was to that issue 8, which we're kind of looking at. So, as I understand it. Well, I think I need to. So, are there a couple of weeks like even have to
Sorry, just letting everyone know we're just about to go and get Judge Armitage before we start. Do you call recording? Yes. Okay. Is the in-session light on? Is the in-session light on? Okay.
The ones that were actually injuries has fallen outside of the
Yeah,
teams.
I just think it will be in the second quarter.
We'll have it about that. And, so who might actually bring some therapy for this was the,
So
Brilliant. Peggy.
Thank you so much. I see. Okay. Okay. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Patty. Yes, and so you've seen the revised issues list. No, that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, I see.
Peggy, they say it's like herding cats.
I found cats much easier.
All stand. The local court is now in session.
Welcome. Take a seat. Just before we begin, this is the second directions hearing for the inquest into the death of Kumanjai Walker. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where this court sits, the Aranda people, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and emerging, and to all First Nations people in court or watching these proceedings. Before taking appearances, I would like to again express my sincere condolences to Kumanjai Walker's family and his community for their loss and ongoing grief and trauma. At the last directions hearing, I acknowledged that families and communities' voices had not yet been heard. That remains true. But I understand that some of you have now had the opportunity of meeting my counsel assisting, Dr. Peggy Dwyer and Mr. Patrick Coleridge. I sincerely thank you for welcoming them warmly into your community over the last few days. We are genuinely seeking to understand and give a voice to your grief and loss and hopes for the future. I understand you have much to share and say, and Peggy and Paddy will continue to meet and work with the family and the community to provide a pathway for your full participation in this inquest. Before I take appearances, Ms. Dwyer, are there members of the family or community here today?
Yes, there are, Your Honour. I understand that Mr. Joseph Lane is here and Miss Annie Lane are here.
Hello. I'm sorry that you're crowded there in the back of court. Can I say that I expect that this courtroom might feel quite alien and even somewhat intimidating with all of these people, lawyers, barristers sitting around here today. I can assure you that you are not alone in those feelings, and others are feeling a bit overawed by these proceedings today. I also want to assure you that everyone here is working together in the hope of finding a better way forward following Kumanjai Walker's traumatic death.
We might not all agree on what the future could or should look like, but we are united in the search. Your participation, the family and the community's participation, is an essential feature of this proceeding, and you are very warmly welcomed here today. I'll now take appearances, Ms Dwyer. And what I will just ask that for the benefit of the family who are present and any other family or community who might be watching these proceedings today, when you announce your appearances, could you just please explain briefly for any family members or community members who are watching, your role or your position in relation to these proceedings? Yes, Ms Dwyer.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, my name is Peggy Dwyer, for the record and for the families, and I appear with Paddy Coleridge, who's sitting beside me, and we are, in effect, Your Honour's counsel assisting. So we will help Your Honour to call the witnesses that are relevant in this inquest, to develop an issues list, which I'll talk about shortly, and to work to understand the community and the families in particular, and everybody affected by this tragic death, so we can air those issues. But Your Honour, members of the family and community will be hearing a lot from me throughout the course of the inquest, because I'll be the one that calls the witnesses first and asks them the first set of questions, or in some circumstances, Paddy will call those witnesses and ask them questions.
Thank you, Ms Dwyer.
Good morning, Your Honour. My name is Paula Moreau, MORREAU for the record. I am counsel instructed by Streeton's lawyers for the Brown family, who are one of the family groups of Kumjal Walker.
Thank you. And I notice we're moving along the table, if that's all right with you, Dr Freckleton.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Good morning, Your Honour. My name is Bo, B-O-E. I'm one of the counsel retained by Hearn Legal for the Walker, Lane and Robertson families.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honour. My name is Ian Freckleton. I'm appearing with Miss Amanda Bernard, who is on screen from Melbourne, for the Northern Territory Police Force. And what that means is for the institution of the police, but also for all members at this stage of the Northern Territory Police Force, save Mr Rolfe. That may change a little if conflicts emerge, but that's the position for the moment. And the Northern Territory Police Force is hoping also to work collaboratively with Council assisting and other members of Council in the search for better understanding of what happened and also how it can be avoided in the future.
Thank you.
I
yes.
should have said, given what Your Honour said about families present, that it was intended for many more members of the families to attend, but there's been a personal matter in Kintore, which has another death and another funeral. So they are engaged, they are very interested, and they would welcome what Your Honour just said about their role.
Thanks, Mr. Booth. So it's a little complicated because we've got some people in court and some people on the screen. Do we have appearances from further back in the courtroom?
Thank you, Your Honour.
Can I just ask you either to speak up or move forward? I know that's complicated, but I just need to make sure we have it on the transcript and everyone can hear.
Thank you, Your Honour. My name is Julian McMahon, and I appear with Greer Bow, who's on screen and currently in Melbourne. She wasn't able to travel today. We appear for the Paramburu Committee, and our role is to give a voice to the committee and to hopefully assist the court, Your Honour, with recommendations with a view to prevention. Our focus is on prevention and to assist with recommendations and to give a voice.
Thank you, Ms Murphy. Any other appearance? Yes.
The place in the court. My name is Julian Murphy, and I'm junior counsel appearing with Ms Wild and Mr Bolton, who aren't able to appear today. We appear for the North Australian Aboriginal Justice Agency, NAJA, who is supported by the Human Rights Law Centre. And NAJA is an interested party in these proceedings and sees its role as to represent the interests of Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory.
Thank you.
My name is McCarthy. And I appear on behalf of the Department of Health, and our role is to assist the Department of Health to make sure that all of the information that's relevant to this inquiry gets put before the inquiry.
Thank you. Is
If the court, please.
Sorry, I can't see everyone. Oh, now I can see. Okay, thanks.
If the court pleases, Luke Officer, I appear for Constable Zachary Rolfe. I instruct David Edwardson QC, who is not present on the screen today, and our role is to act for Constable Rolfe in his individual capacity as a police officer who has an interest in these proceedings.
Thank you. I think that's all the parties who have been given leave at this stage.
Yes, Your Honour, I believe that's correct.
All right. But there is another party seeking leave, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I think Miss Nobbs, I understand that it's Miss Oslands who seeks leave, but it might be Miss Nobbs who's on the screen there, Your Honour.
Yes. Do you wish to deal with that application now?
Yes, I think it's a convenient time. Thank you, Your Honour.
All right. Yes, Miss Nobbs?
Yes, Your Honour. Thank you. I appear on behalf of the Northern Territory Police Association. I instruct Counsel Ms Sally Oslands, and we are seeking leave to hear at the inquest. The Northern Territory Police Association represents a number of, the majority of the Northern Territory Police members. We are the peak representative body and have an interest in a number of issues. We provided an outline of those submissions to Your Honour.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
do we seeking leave here?
All right. Just in relation to that application, are there any other submissions?
Yes, Your Honour, we would like to be heard on this issue if we could, please.
Yes, Mr.
We accept without reservation that the Northern Territory Police Association is interested in these proceedings, but we express reservations about whether they have, for the purposes of Section 40, an interest in them. And we draw Your Honour's attention to the matters which are specifically raised on behalf of the Association in their application for leave. They identify 7 matters. The first is what police were doing in Yuendabu in the days immediately following the death. That appears to be a reasonably confined issue, Your Honour, but it is the Northern Territory Police who can inform you of that, rather than an association that represents some police. Those are issues of fact as to which you will receive evidence from those who were present and who were informed specifically about that. Then there are a series of matters which are raised in respect of policies, procedures, training and similar. I'll go through those one by one,
yes,
but briefly. The first is policies and procedures including risk assessments governing the recruitment and training of members, particularly those in specialist units such as the IRT. Those policies and procedures are those of the police force. They are the subject from time to time of consultation with the association, but they are those of the police force, and you will be receiving evidence from Deputy Commissioners Smallpage about those and about changes that are being made to them. The association does not, with respect, have an authoritative position that it can adopt in relation to such matters. It is the force that speaks on behalf of the policies and procedures of the force. Next, cross-cultural and conflict resolution training and support for police members. The situation there is cognate, Your Honour. It is the Northern Territory Police Force that has responsibility for and does provide training to members. It is the police force that speaks in respect of training, whether it's sufficient, whether it needs to change. That's an issue for the Northern Territory Police Force, and you will be receiving evidence about that. Next, processes and procedures governing disciplinary processes for police members. Again, those processes are of the Northern Territory Police Force. True it is that the Northern Territory Police Association provides support and assistance to members, at least on some occasions, but the processes and the procedures are those of the force. And again, you'll be receiving evidence about those from senior members of the police force. Next, policies and procedures governing and guiding the investigation of deaths in custody. Again, those are the policies and procedures of the Northern Territory Police Force. There might be persons or entities that disagree with those, but the entity that can tell you about what they are and how they have operated, for instance, in respect of Mr. Rolfe, is the Northern Territory Police Force. And there isn't, with respect to any other entity, including the association, that can replicate that informed perspective. Next, policies and guidelines in relation to police members carrying guns in communities. Again, this is an issue about which some of the parties at the bar table will have different views, but it is the Northern Territory Police Force that will tell you what the policies are, because they are its policies, similarly with the guidelines. And the association might have views about such matters, but so do many entities in the community, and so will parties at the bar table. In our respectful submission, there is not a distinctive position that can constructively assist Your Honour from the association in this regard. Finally, drug and alcohol testing of police members. There is a limited facility for this at the moment, which will be an issue before Your Honour. It is subject to change, quite possibly, within the next months in terms of legislative / regulatory change. And the Northern Territory Police Force has a role in facilitating that change by reason of its role in assisting the Ministry in respect of such matters. The association might have views about such things, but it is the force that is integral to the change process that has not yet occurred. So in our respectful submission, there is an important distinction between parties that are interested in matters and have views and ideas about them, and those who have a sufficient interest. The Northern Territory Police Force is the repository and is responsible for procedures, policies, guidelines, and application of policies. The force will tell you about those, and will give whatever assistance we can in terms of the substance of them, the reasons for them, and changes which are afoot in respect of certain of them. In our submission, and this is not to denigrate the important role played by the Police Association and those representing it, there is a real limit to how they can assist you to understand better what those policies are, because they are what they are, and we'll be able to inform you as to how and why they've been drafted and how they're applied, and the extent to which they may be subject to change, because these are matters which will be set before Your Honour, we hope in a clear and quite extensive fashion, by documentation which evidences the institutional response from a Northern Territory Police Force. Your Honour, you are already in receipt of a diversity of views from the various parties on screen and present. It is important that this inquest have a finishing time, and that there not be a proliferation of voices which take up your attention. We won't trouble you with the law in respect of rights of appearance, in respect of Section 40. The very essence of the law about this as interpreted in this country and Canada is that it's a discretionary decision for you, evaluating whether you are going to receive a distinctive and material benefit from any parties who seek leave to appear. We respectfully say that while the association is interested, it does not have a distinctive additional voice on the matters which it has identified, and therefore that you should exercise your discretion to decline this application. However, should you not be wholly with us, there are categories of representation which are contemplated under Section 40, subsection 3, and those are to appear or be represented, to call and examine or cross-examine witnesses and make submissions. Should Your Honour contemplate that you might receive some benefit from the Northern Territory Police Association perspective, we would respectfully suggest that that should be confined to permitting the association to make submissions at the conclusion of evidence. Thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr Freckleton. Does anyone else wish to respond to the application?
Your Honour, for the Walker, Lane and Robertson families, we, with respect, adopt Dr Freckleton's submissions in full for the reasons that he's explained.
Are the Brown families in the same position?
Are there any other persons who wish to respond to the application? Ms Dwyer?
Your Honour, this is an issue that has emerged, I think, just in the last day when we received, there's no criticism of my learned friend, Ms Nobbs-Kakuro, but the application was recently received and I think requires full consideration. And the submissions of Dr Freckleton require full consideration, and then Ms Nobbs-Kakuro and Ms Oslands may wish to reply, and perhaps that could be best done in writing so that Your Honour can then give it careful consideration. So if I could urge Your Honour not to make a final decision today. I don't wish to be heard on it. I wish to consider it further, if I may, Your Honour.
Right. Ms Nobbs-Kakuro, I've received that application. I've heard the submissions. As Counsel Assisting has indicated, if you wish to respond to those submissions, I'd ask that you do that in writing and we can discuss a reasonable time frame. But I will reserve my decision and I will provide my decision in writing after I've had an opportunity to consider all of that material.
Your Honour, after Ms Nobbs-Kakuro provides her submissions, lest there be anything new which emerges, might we have 24 hours to respond if necessary?
Yes.
Thank you.
You may. Yes, Ms Dwyer.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, might I start by just expressing my thanks to the community for having myself and Patrick Coleridge there over the last few days. We intend to return again, provided that is acceptable to family and the community, in June, to speak to anybody else who would like to see us, to listen to any concerns that the community have about the inquest process, and particularly how it might differ from the trial process, and what the aims and objectives of the inquest are, and to develop a deeper understanding of the issues that affect the community and family that are relevant to this inquest. Might I say, Your Honour, that a lot of progress has been made since the last directions hearing. That starts with the brief of evidence that has been served. The bulk of a very significant brief of evidence was served in mid-April. There are over 12,000 items of evidence, including documents and recordings. As with any inquest, the investigation is ongoing, and there will be further statements no doubt obtained, but in plenty of time for people to consider them fully for the inquest. A very early draft of the witness list was distributed this morning, and parties will no doubt reflect on that, request that other witnesses be added, or have comments to make about further evidence that might be obtained. Just while I'm on my feet, an example that comes to my mind is that, of course, we'll be adding Deputy Commissioner Smallpage to that list, who will no doubt be providing very important evidence for Your Honour about some changes that have been implemented by the Northern Territory Police Force, which I anticipate will occur or have occurred since Kumanjai's death. So I'm grateful to my learned friend for indicating that that statement is forthcoming.
Yes.
I also anticipate that some expert witness statements will be served in response to the finalised issues list and the draft witness list. I've already had discussions with some of my learned friends about the experts who they seek to put forward. Some of that evidence will be received, I anticipate, in documentary form, and in other circumstances, Your Honour may wish to hear from those experts. So that's still to come. But can I reassure Your Honour that we are very much on track and that a substantial amount of work has been done to ensure that we are on track to commence this inquest in September.
Thank you.
Your Honour, can I make these early remarks? That it's clear to all of us, of course, that Kumanjai's death and the circumstances in which he died are a tragedy for him, his family, the broader community, and of course especially the Warlpiri people of Yuendamu and in and around Yuendamu. We know that Kumanjai's death caused great suffering. It also led to a trial that was draining and stressful for all involved. It's clear that his death has also caused some division and heartache within agencies and within the community. For very understandable reasons, this case will continue to stir great emotion. And I'll shortly address the issues list, but before I do, it might be a good time for me to say something about the functions of the coroner's court. Unlike a civil or criminal trial, an inquest is an inquisitorial process, as Your Honour knows. Although parties are entitled to procedural fairness, the strict rules of evidence don't apply. In an inquest, witnesses are encouraged to speak up and to speak their truth, and this court wants to hear their voices. That is the way that Your Honour can fully understand the circumstances that led to Kumanjai's tragic death. And it's also the way in which Your Honour might determine what changes are needed to make it less likely that there would be a similar tragedy in the future. It's also the way, in my respectful submission, that everyone affected, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, Yapa and Kadia, can better understand each other and to work together to prevent such a tragedy occurring in the future. If mistakes were made leading up to Kumanjai's death, the aim of this inquest is not to blame one individual. We must acknowledge the mistakes, learn the lessons from them, and prevent those deaths occurring in the future. Your Honour's functions and powers are governed by the Coroner's Act. Section 26 of that Act says, in effect, that where Your Honour holds an inquest into a death of someone in custody, Your Honour may investigate and report on any matter connected with public health or safety or the administration of justice that is relevant to the death. A coroner who holds an inquest into that death can consider any recommendations and make recommendations with respect to the prevention of future deaths. In fact, Section 34 of the Act states that a coroner investigating such a death must, if possible, make findings in relation to any relevant circumstances and to make those comments about public health, safety and administration of justice. On the 26th of April this year, a very early draft issues list was distributed to parties. There were over 50 issues on that list, and parties were invited to consider that list to suggest any issues or to inform us of any concerns about the breadth of those issues. Can I make this clear firstly before we embark on any discussion? An issues list is not a rigid document. It's not like a pleading in a civil court case, nor is it a document that counsel assisting is required under the Act to distribute. This and other coronial courts have developed a practice of producing an issues list to assist the interested parties and family and community to understand the types of issues to be ventilated that are relevant to Your Honour's considerations under the Act. As Your Honour understands and is often said in cases like this, the Your Honour is not conducting a roving royal commission, but the NT Coroner's Act provides Your Honour with a broad discretion to consider issues relevant to the circumstances of Kumanjai's death. This inquest will necessarily involve looking at the past conduct of some police officers, including Constable Rolfe. For example, in relation to recruitment, training and disciplinary process. This is not a commission of inquiry into Constable Rolfe. In fact, the focus is on the Northern Territory Police Force response to issues identified in recruitment, training and response to complaints of excessive use of force. And the example provided by issues affecting Constable Rolfe really reveal circumstances that Your Honour will consider about the Northern Territory Police Force response. And the aim of that is to develop that deep understanding and to assist Your Honour to make recommendations. Your Honour has received submissions from all interested parties who sought leave. I am pleased to say, Your Honour, that as I understand it, parties are now broadly in agreement that the revised issues list circulated will be of assistance to Your Honour.
Thank you.
And is appropriate. I'll just put on the record now, broadly, some of the issues that will be ventilated. Things like what are the circumstances of Kumanjai's death, and then a number of questions related to that. That involves, of course, looking at some of what happened on that tragic day, on the 9th of November 2019, and the lead up to it. Your Honour will receive into evidence all the full statements made for the purposes of the criminal trial and the trial transcript. The benefit of that to this court is that Your Honour does not have to rehear the evidence that was heard in the criminal trial. That evidence is accepted. But of course the criminal trial was not looking at the issues that are looked at in this inquest. So to the extent necessary, witnesses will be asked questions that are relevant to Your Honour's inquiry, but we won't be going over all the same ground in the criminal trial. And I think that's important to put on the record because everybody has suffered great trauma in having to relive the circumstances of Kumanjai's tragic death again for the trial, and so we won't need to do that in exactly the same way as was done at the trial.
Thank you.
So we put into evidence all that transcript, and then we'll be calling witnesses who are relevant to those circumstances. By way of an example, one of the issues on the issues list is the deployment of the immediate response team into Yuendamu in November 2019. And some of the issues that Your Honour will be looking at are what is the IRT, what were the relevant policies and procedures, and what led to them being deployed to Yuendamu on that day. Was it appropriate that they went into Yuendamu on that day and that they carried the military-style weapons that were taken in? Who was responsible for completing a risk assessment prior to the deployment of the IRT into Yuendamu? What's the nature of the risk assessments, and was the risk assessment adequate? We'll also be asking questions like, would it be possible to involve community elders and other Aboriginal persons in risk assessments in relation to those sorts of decisions? Now, the evidence that was called in the trial will be very useful to Your Honour in my respectful submission, but there's also other evidence that you will want to hear from members of the IRT team and the community police that will be relevant to Your Honour's considerations.
Yes, thank you.
Another issue is the recruitment, training and supervision of officers within the Northern Territory Police Force, as it is relevant to this case. There is an issue that Your Honour looks at concerning the conduct of the investigation by Northern Territory Police Force. I anticipate a slight amendment to the way that it's currently worded so that it would read something like this. Is there evidence that the fairness or efficiency of the investigation by the Northern Territory Police Force was in any way compromised or impaired? No prejudgment of that issue has been made, of course, but it's an important thing for Your Honour to consider and process. We're looking also at the issue of the departure of the Yuendamu Medical Centre staff, so that there were no Yuendamu Medical Centre staff available at the time that Kumanjai was shot. We know that's an issue of great concern to the community, and Your Honour will hear evidence to understand why it was that clinic staff left Yuendamu and what can be done, if anything, and we hope there are things that can improve relations and safety of clinic staff with community so that we can ensure community have full access to medical services. And we will look at those issues in a really constructive way, where voices are heard calmly and clearly and with a view to really understanding each other so that progress can be made and these circumstances don't happen again. There are some broader issues in policing that are looked at. For example, What are the policies and procedures that are applicable to Northern Territory Police concerning drug and alcohol testing of police after a critical incident like that, like this one, and how does it compare to other jurisdictions? And I understand from what my learned friend Dr. Freckleton has said this morning, it may well be that we will receive some evidence from Deputy Commissioner Small-Page about some changes that are planned or have taken place since Kubanjai's death. One of the other issues towards the back end of the issues list are what are the known measures or community supports that have successfully improved relations and minimised the use of force in communities, particularly between young men or young people and police? And are there ways in which, are they available in Yuendamu, and are there ways in which we can improve those practices in Yuendamu? So as my learned friends understand, it's a lengthy issues list. It's not a prescriptive list of the issues for Your Honour to look at, but it really puts parties on notice about what are they important issues, and it's expressed in a way we hope that everybody will understand is constructive.
And I really appreciate the engagement and input from all of the parties in working with Council Assisting to identify as best we can at this point in time the types of issues that we'll be exploring in the inquest. So I really appreciate that level of engagement.
Your Honour, as I understand, as Your Honour knows, the way in which we did that was that we distributed that draft issues list, and then Your Honour received submissions from all interested parties who had sought leave by that time. And in response to that, Your Honour's Council Assisting team then took on board some of the submissions, took on board all of the submissions, made some changes, and then redistributed an issues list. I think then, on further reflection and discussion with my learned friends, any concerns that anybody had have fallen away as a result of the revised issues list. There'll be some further slight tweaks before a finalised list is developed and then made publicly available.
And as you said, our list is a guide and it may continue to develop or change over time.
Yes.
And with input from the parties.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, before I move on from that topic, might I just confirm that I am correct? As I say, I've been very grateful for the assistance of my learned friends in discussions, but that I'm correct in my understanding that nobody then wishes to be heard any further on that issues list.
Your Honour, for my part, we really do appreciate the attempt to assist the parties to understand what Your Honour is interested in, but we would maintain our request that it be very broadly expressed rather than going too detailed into specific questions at this stage. That probably brought up the back of some people objecting to a particular question. I must say I misapprehended the document as including 46 issues. I thought it included 7 issues with some questions that were intended to particularise those issues.
That is correct.
Yeah, yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah, and that's
so
why
there's 7 broad issues, yes. And we've tried to break that down further to give some structure. Yes, yeah. To the inquest,
yes.
And as I said, we can continue
yes.
to work with those.
And that's why we say, with respect, the amended list of those 7 issues is something, for our part, we're very comfortable with and hope to contribute further once we're on top of the entire brief.
And it is a substantial brief, and I really am, again, grateful to Council Assisting for organising it and providing it in such a timely way that it's accessible to everybody.
Yes, and whilst it probably is not of much interest to many of the parties or to Your Honour, the families are still waiting confirmation of whether or not any of the lawyers will be funded. That has been delayed because of the events from last week in terms of the election. I think the statute required the Attorney-General to give an answer by this Friday, after promises of earlier indication. So we will continue to attempt to assist Your Honour as we can. Hence, I'm sure Dr. Dwyer will get to it later. Our submissions sought some assistance in terms of when the issues that we are particularly interested in might be the subject of viva voce evidence, so that we can be here for those periods at least.
I'm mindful of your earlier submissions, Mr. Bowe, and I know that there's been discussion with counsel assisting to try and resolve those in a way that is suitable to everybody, and I'm sure those discussions will continue. I understand there's been a lot of progress, and it is hoped that, you know, the main areas of interest for you and the families.
We really appreciate your acknowledgement of that. May I say this, just from speaking to Dr. Dwyer in the last few days, that issue will go away, I think. That is from our part at least, I don't know about the Brown families, but for our part, those submissions that were advanced on the earlier occasion earnestly put before Your Honour the concerns we had. If I may say, the cooperation in identifying when particular actual evidence is being called, which I believe will be achieved, then that issue may no longer be a concern for Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Bowe. I appreciate that. Yes.
Your Honour, I can also confirm the Brown family's agreement with the proposal of counsel assisting, but may I just place on the record the context to that, which is that I should read formally the submissions of the 23rd of May that were filed. As I understand, and now what's been placed on the record, the issues for consideration at this inquest will cover the additional matters that we had sought in perhaps more specific terms or in other contexts. We maintain that these matters are matters of relevance, but we are content to not have additional matters placed on the list at this stage, given the indications of the purpose of the list, and also the, I suppose, responsibility for us, if we are seeking those further issues at some later stage to be ventilated, to point in the evidence to why they will be relevant to the death and connected to the death. And we can take that on board as we proceed.
Sure.
The Brown family too, as has been indicated, are still working through, their representation is still working through the brief. And, you know, we'll be in a better position to identify exactly the witnesses that we wish to interrogate at the hearing, and you know, what we might see as falling from that in terms of Your Honour's findings and comments at that point. And in terms of the hearing duration and listing, in terms of the Brown family, there is a request from my clients that there might be a period of break at some point during the hearing. I think that's something too that we can gauge as the hearing proceeds, and how the families are experiencing the inquest. Can I say about that the legal team will work cooperatively and collaboratively with counsel assisting in order to ensure that we can appear as needed with the witnesses that we've identified that we'd like to cross-examine as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I do appreciate the onerous task that is before us, and the need to accommodate human elements in that task, and we will work with the parties to best meet those needs, but also proceed in an efficient manner for the whole of the community. Does anyone else wish to make any submissions at this stage?
Yes, Your Honour, if might be an opportune time, given
yes.
What
Yes, Mr.
Dr.
Officer.
Dwyer has raised, and I'll do it as brief as possible. Insofar as our note that was filed with the court, which responded to some of the issues as having been answered in the trial, we accept that the trial evidence and the facts, which I think, without much dispute between all of the parties, is going to answer a lot of the questions for this inquest. But we also accept that some of those questions were not explored in the trial. For example, training loomed large, and there's an abundance of evidence about what that training is. Whether the training is appropriate, of course, that's something Your Honour can explore. So there is no objection taken to matters being extrapolated from the trial evidence. As far as I understand, Dwyer. Those were raised.
Sorry, Mr. Officer,
Yes.
that you just said as far as, and then you broke up. Could you just go back a little bit and repeat that?
Yes, Your Honour. In respect of the issues where objection was taken expressly, having discussed those with Dr. Dwyer, it does seem to be that they can be resolved, or that they have resolved. I have proposed a few amendments which I understand that Dr. Dwyer will consider. But for the record, what I do note is that it seems to me that issues on the revised document 24, 30, 33, 38, 39, 43 and 44 are those which directly relate to the role. Having said that, what I do appreciate, Dr. Dwyer having been on the record today, and I endorse that this is not a roving Royal Commission into the conduct of Constable Rolfe. And we are certainly alive, as is Constable Rolfe, to the positives that will come from this inquest. And it is important that there is an attempt to rebuild the relationships between the community on one hand and police on the other. What we don't want is further division, and this inquest requires great focus on the issues that are important and cooperation between the advocates who represent different interests. And so there does need to be some constraint on the issues that are raised at the inquest. However, I am grateful for the indication that this will not be an inquiry into the conduct of Constable Rolfe, and those issues I have identified explicitly which relate to him. I understand from what Councillor Sisting has said, the focus is more on the department, the Northern Territory Police, and their response as opposed to the direct conduct of Constable Rolfe.
No, may I just rise? I had understood from Dr. Dwyer this morning that the note provided on behalf of Constable Rolfe in making submissions about certain questions being outside the scope or certain issues outside the scope was being abandoned.
Look, I think it is. I think it's a question of how we focus the inquiry.
Yes.
So, as I understand it, and Mr. Dwyer will correct me, I'm sure, if I misstated in some way, there will be some focus on Officer Rolfe, because obviously he is integral to these events, but in understanding his position and what has occurred in his experience in the police force, that will be an example or an exemplar of what might be broader issues within the police force. So the focus is going to be on the broader issues as drawn out from the specific examples.
With respect to it, we accept that, and we certainly expect it for your honour to identify, perhaps question by question, issues raised with particular witnesses. We're proceeding on the basis that Councillor Sisting's amended list of the issues, the 7 issues, defines the current framework for your honour's inquiry, and that none of these submissions suggested that the questions outside the scope are being maintained for argument. And if it is to be maintained for argument, it should be postponed once everybody is more on top of how those issues will be interrogated. I just thought Mr. Officer was suggesting that, I'm not verbally either of them, that suggesting that there'd been some acknowledgement that some of the submissions as to what was outside the scope had been accommodated, but I may have misheard.
I think it's just being better understood rather than varied or accommodated. It's just better understood as to why they are issues, but where that leads us. Do you wish to respond at this stage, Mr. Wyatt?
I can see that I think Mr. Officer is nodding in response to Your Honour's suggestions in relation to how we understand this. So I can confirm that the amended list of 7 issues defines the scope of this inquest, and as I understand it, neither Mr. Officer nor any of the parties disagree with that or wishes to be heard further. I understand Mr. Officer's concerns. The questions underneath those 7 broad issues are really to give examples of what we'll be looking at. I understand Mr. Officer was at pains to put on the record the concerns for his client, but I don't think that changes the fact that the submissions initially made in writing on behalf of Mr. Rolfe, which objected to the scope of some of those issues, those submissions have been withdrawn. And I hope that we all understand each other better in relation to that. But I plan to redistribute the finalised issues list. That is, with the 7 issues, but with some questions underneath it. They'll be tweaked ever so slightly in response to phone calls I received early this morning. But they won't in any way change what those 7 issues are, and I hope that we're all on the same page as to how we understand the focus of the inquest will proceed. But perhaps Mr. Officer can confirm that there's nothing further that needs to be debated at this stage. Because I will say this, once that issues list is distributed, if there is a need for a further directions hearing, we can of course have one. But we all need to understand that Your Honour's scope of inquiry is broad, and that list has been distributed to try and assist the parties to understand where we're going.
Yes. Did you wish to respond?
Your Honour, I will briefly, Your Honour. Your Honour is correct in the submission I was making in your interpretation of it. The reason I made that submission and the reason the conversations we had with Dr. Dwyer is that one could be forgiven when they looked at the list of issues at first blush that directly related to my client, that indeed it looked like a roving royal commission into his conduct. However, I am assured that that is not the case, and it was, as Your Honour has quite rightly pointed out, a better understanding and interpretation of what exactly the inquest seeks to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Freckleton.
Your Honour, the Northern Territory Police Force is content with the issues, delineation and the questions under those, especially with the clarification of number 45.
Yes, thank you for your input into that.
While I'm on my feet, Your Honour, myself and some members of my team visited Uendamu a short while ago, and when with Sergeant Jolly, who's the most senior police officer currently in Uendamu, were invited to attend at House 511. We checked with her as to whether that was going to be offensive or traumatic for anyone concerned, and were assured that not only had the elders permitted us to be in Uendamu, but that they invited us to go to that house. We did that. We looked through. We understood better on the basis of what we saw. I spoke briefly to 1 or 2 people, and I'd like to go on the record as saying that we appreciated the gracious conduct of those who were present and the generosity of spirit of all concerned. It was very kind.
Thank you, Dr. Freckleton. We are asking a lot, aren't we, of
Yes.
the community to rebuild trust and relationships, and they are reaching out, as you say,
Yes.
graciously and generously, and we hope to build on that.
Yes.
Are there any other further submissions in relation to the issues list, if I can put it that way? Not at this stage. Ms Dwyer.
Then finally, Your Honour, might I just make some remarks in relation to timetable?
Sure.
As Your Honour knows, we'll commence this inquest on the 5th of September. Can I just reassure my learned friend, Mr Bowe, that we understand that it's issues 1 to 4 that are of particular concern to him as expressed in correspondence, and we will make every effort to call witnesses related to those issues in that first month of September. So as my understanding is that there's no objection to the timetable on that basis?
Yes, thank you. Your Honour, can I be clear about that? It's not that we're not interested in the other issues. It's only that insofar as oral evidence being called, it's issues 1 and 4 that we would like prioritised. That's the first thing, so I think we're in agreement on that. In line with the broader submissions that have been made about how this inquest will be conducted, and in particular taking on board Dr. Freckleton's last comment and submissions, which we welcome. That is the burden that this process is on the family, and hence that is why we've asked for some time to work out how the family can best provide the information necessary for the questions that Dr. Dwyer has listed in issue 1. And I think there's general agreement that we can come up with something that doesn't mean that the family are put through this process again, in addition to the, with respect, important remarks made by Dr. Dwyer about what's hoped to be achieved in Your Honour's comments. There is an issue of fatigue, and there is an issue of expectations being raised way above the reality of Your Honour's confined statutory function. And that is a matter that we've tried very much to contain.
Thank you, Mr. Bowe. I appreciate that. And it is important that we bear in mind that we will do our best to understand and make recommendations, but obviously the implementation of change is in others' hands.
Yes, and that's why it may have been obvious in our submissions, Your Honour, we're at pains to want to focus on what can be achieved pursuant to the statute, whether it be the findings, in particular Roman 5 and subsection 1 of 34, or 35 comments or recommendations, and that's where we hope to adopt the approach from Mark Twain that we want to write you a short letter, but we need a lot of time to do so. That is, we do want to get on top of the material, especially when funding becomes available and others can join our teams. And secondly, to drill down and assist counsel assisting in determining what further viva voce evidence is necessary and limited to the very minimum when it comes to the families. So that this does not become, if I can adopt Mr. Officer's submission, the Royal Commission on the families and their feelings. I mean, a lot of that is very documented. Saying it over and over again is painful, and we're committed to confining that as much as possible.
Thanks. We are, of course, taking steps to consider how access to the inquest can be made available in Yuendamu, and so that people aren't required to be here who wish to participate. And the live streaming assists with that. And it may be that one member of the council assisting team may spend some time in Yuendamu during the course of the inquest to help people engage from their own community.
Without trying to cut across the best intentions, and I'm not being dismissive about that, the issue of live streaming is a matter of some concern to many members of the family, that it becomes a trigger focus within the community. Over a 3-month period of live streaming, almost nobody's going to go there, but it's a continuing thorn for the community to have to deal with, that something's going on. That's the first thing.
Thanks, Mr. Bowe. We will take that on board, and I'd invite you to raise that with council assisting, and we can
and Mr.
work with that.
Mr. McMahon, who's representing the committee, and Ms. Bowe, may be able to further assist in that dialogue, because there are different views about this within the community. For the family's part, as we've said in our submissions, they will attend as best possible. The difficulty for Your Honour is this: the real reasons why they can't attend, and they weren't able to attend today, is that on numerous occasions when courts have been convening in relation to this matter, whether it be the committal hearing or the trial, enormous community-raised funds have been utilised to transport people here, either by providing petrol or getting buses, etc. Those funds have dwindled, so it's very difficult to get family to be able to physically attend. For them to be able to attend for 3 months is just impossible. So there will be various attempts made to make sure that those who really do wish to attend and can attend, because they've got jobs, they've got children, etc., will attend, and we greatly appreciate the efforts that Dr. Dwyer has foreshadowed in trying to limit the duration at which their counsel will be interrogating witnesses.
Your Honour, just on the back of that, and of course I'll continue those constructive dialogues with my learned friends about how best we can involve the family, make sure that those who want to be involved can hear the evidence, but not in any way cause trauma by making sure that, for example, if there was a live stream or access to the facilities, that can be done discreetly in a room that people can access if they would like to. There's no suggestion that it will be broadcast publicly on an oval that people would walk past without wanting to seek access and understand it. Your Honour, when we were in community and in consultation with my learned friends, a consistent theme that we heard was that many members of in fact everybody we spoke to, would like Your Honour to go to Yuendamu, and that perhaps one way would be for the first few days of the inquest to be held in Yuendamu, and not to hear formal evidence, but for Your Honour to just sit and listen to anybody who would like to speak, to obviously in some more structured way, not in a way that anybody would be subjected to cross-examination, but just in a way that honours the community of Yuendamu and is very much directed by them in the way that they would like that to take place. So I will continue to work with my learned friends about how that is done in the most respectful way to the community of Yuendamu. But certainly, I think for all of us, I'm sure I speak for all of my learned friends in saying that we strive to have this inquest done in a way that is most respectful to the people of Yuendamu. And if showing our respect can involve us being in Yuendamu in a way that honours culture, that would be deeply appreciated. And that if that opportunity is there, then we will certainly embrace it.
Yes.
So I'll talk to my learned friends. I've looked at accommodation in Tillmouth Wells and whether that's an option that we go out for a couple of days, or whether that's a day, or whatever that is best for family and community, we will encourage Your Honour to adopt. And I know that Your Honour will be particularly concerned to do that in a way that is culturally safe and also as respectful as possible to everybody concerned.
Yes. So, look, I really appreciate the work that you've been doing to date in making those connections and building those connections, and I'll be interested to hear further in relation to how that might be progressed.
May it please the Court. Thank you.
Are there any other issues for today, Dr. Dwyer?
Not that I'm aware of, Your Honour. So I think the next formal court date we have is the 5th of September, but of course when we reconvene in Court 1 in Alice Springs in September is to be determined. That is the exact day of that week is to be determined. If there is a need for a further directions hearing, if I could just invite my learned friends to let me know the reasons for that. But what I anticipate the next step is for myself and Mr. Coleridge to distribute the finalised issues list, which will then be publicly available, and then we'll just continue our hard work to make sure we're properly prepared.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. McMahon, sorry, it's a bit hard when you're in the back row.
Thank you, Your Honour. I thought it might be worth mentioning, Your Honour, there was a letter which came out recently from the solicitor, I think, asking about some questions about what cultural practices might be appropriate and so on. And I've noticed in the last couple of days, reading some submissions, that the families on a number of those issues really say, well, let's see what the Paramburu committee wants to do about that. And so I can't answer those questions now, but I can acknowledge that we'll certainly be working with council assisting to give you answers as quickly as we can on things like appropriate cultural practices and so on, which I know from the letter matters that your solicitor wants to hear from us about. John, please.
Thank you. We appreciate all of the work that is going on by all council and lawyers assisting council in relation to engaging with their own clients and also engaging with council assisting to develop a really robust and inclusive model for this inquest. We really appreciate those efforts. Yes, Mr. Bowe.
One matter that hasn't been discussed. Knowledge about what's happening in this court comes out in various ways, first-hand, second-hand and the like. And I know there's been some concern that various parts of the brief not be disclosed and there's orders in place. May I ask, however, that in relation to what has been submitted by the parties, all of them, in which, even though I didn't formally read them, I'm assuming that they've been received into the inquest, and the transcript of these proceedings be able to be permitted to be distributed to our clients and to the community so they understand, probably with explanations from the various lawyers, because one of the things we found in our nearly 3 years engagement with the family is that because imprecision is the information and because there's lots of different perspectives even within the community, that some things are being messaged out which do not reflect what in fact the families are hoping to achieve or what Your Honour is able to do. And one example is that there's been a particular advocate who's been setting out 16 issues for this inquest, and it's receiving a lot of social media and it's not reflective of what's actually happening. So I ask that Your Honour permit the parties to distribute these submissions to their clients and for their clients to fully understand what's happening. That won't involve going into any of the evidence at all.
I see. So, of course, Lee, when my learned friend says advocate, you don't mean one of the legal team at the bar table. Your Honour, of course, it's anticipated that parties will discuss the nature of the evidence to be called with their clients. And the issues list will be publicly available, the finalised issues list. So what we don't want to see happening is for example, the transcript of one person's evidence to be printed off and then widely distributed in the community, because it will it may then cause real unfairness to that.
I'm not talking about any of the evidence.
Then the real issue is the submissions that have been received, the written submissions.
Thus far, as I understand it, the written submissions on the issues list have fallen away largely because of the constructive approach that has been adopted by my learned friends. And I must say there, including, of course, Mr. Officer and Mr. Edwardson, who appear for Constable Rolfe. So we have been able to resolve those issues. And I can reassure my learned friend by the end of today or tomorrow, that revised and finalised issues list will be in his hands and the hands of all parties. So is that the concern?
Perhaps then if just the transcript is available, which acknowledges these matters, and the amended issues list, so that our clients know what's been achieved in this directions hearing.
There's absolutely no problem with that, and obviously, whilst there may be issues with live streaming and the like,
yes,
in relation to access or other things like that, the whole purpose is to make this as available to members of the community, and if that is better served by the provision of a transcript, there's absolutely no problem with the provision of a transcript, and as we said, we'll make the issues list available very, very shortly.
And Your Honour, I'm grateful to my learned friend reminding me of this issue. We're very cognisant of the need to really properly provide some good community education, and I'll certainly work with all my friends to make sure that's developed. We had the opportunity to meet PAW Media, P-A-W Media, the Walpole Media Organisation, and some other stakeholders in Yuindanu, and the Community Justice Centre, Melinda Chu from the CJC was out in community this week really trying to work out what would be the best way to help the community with an education package. And so we're hopeful to continue to develop that and to really provide something that is of great assistance to all members of the community. So we're all on the same page when we start the inquest. So I'm grateful to Mr. Bowe for reminding me of that, because of course the input of his families and all the families will be invaluable in making sure that we develop something that's culturally appropriate and easily understood.
I like the idea of an education package, and if we can progress that, that would be really helpful.
Thank you.
There's nothing further? Again, thank you all for showing your respect to this process by appearing today either in person or via the link. And again, thank you for your engagement with counsel assisting. I really encourage you to speak freely with counsel assisting. I think we can move and progress this matter in a very helpful way through that frank communication. And that completes the proceedings for today. We can adjourn.